They called him unbreakable. For 20 years, Detective Rehan Mirza stared down the worst humanity had to offer, and never once flinched. But the night he walked into that dimly lit apartment on the corner of Gina Avenue, something inside him finally cracked. The radio crackled. The clock on the wall had stopped at 3:17 a.m. The same time every other victim's watch had stopped. And on the mirror, written in what looked like red lipstick, or something far darker, were the words, "You remember me now." No one knew then, but this was the case that would destroy the detective who never broke. The night was heavier than usual, a suffocating, damp fog wrapping itself around the city like a shroud. Detective Rehan Mirza's car tires crunched over the gravel of the narrow alley, leading to the apartment building on Gina Avenue. The street lights flickered in rhythmic uncertainty, casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, though he wasn't sure if it was the cold or a faint, unfamiliar unease crawling up his spine. He had seen countless crime scenes before. Blood, betrayal, desperation. They were his daily companions. But something about this apartment felt different. The building itself seemed to sigh, tired, as if it had been waiting for him to arrive. He noticed the faint smell of burnt incense drifting from an upstairs window, mingling with the metallic temps of rain on concrete. When Rehan finally stepped out, the night air hit him like a slap. The porch light above the apartment flickered erratically, threatening darkness but never quite giving in. Inside, the faint orange glow of a single lamp illuminated a scene that was both clinical and intimate. A young woman, her body unnaturally still, sprawled across the center of the room. The room was spotless, almost sterile, except for subtle hints of chaos. A chair knocked over, a book open face down, a cracked picture frame. He paused at the threshold, taking in the deliberate arrangement. This wasn't random violence. It was a message. His eyes flicked to the mirror on the far wall. Something caught the corner of his vision, a streak of red, a hurried scroll. He leaned closer. "You remember me now?" The words were simple, but they carried a weight that pressed against his chest. Rehan's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his notebook. He hadn't felt this in years. The pull of a case that wasn't just about justice, but about something far more personal. A shiver ran down his spine. He glanced around the room again, noticing subtle inconsistencies. The clock stopped at 3:17 a.m., the same time every other victim's watch had frozen in the cases he couldn't solve. He swallowed hard. The thought that had haunted him for years whispered through his mind, "This is the work of someone who knows me too well." Rehan's phone buzzed. A message from headquarters' second unit, en route. "You, alone, for now." He exhaled slowly, trying to steady the storm inside him. The detective who never broke was about to face a case that threatened not just his career, but his very sense of self. And for the first time in decades, he wondered if he was truly prepared. Rehan circled the room slowly, his flashlight sweeping across walls lined with photos, scattered journals, and the faint smell of perfume still lingering in the air. Every detail was deliberate. Every object, every shadow seemed to whisper a secret he wasn't ready to hear. He knelt beside the victim, carefully examining the scene without touching anything unnecessary. The meticulousness of the arrangement chilled him. Whoever had done this wasn't juste violent. They were intimate, precise, and unnervingly personal. He noticed a photograph half hidden under the edge of the rug. A family portrait, but the faces were slashed with what looked like a knife. The victim's eyes stared back at him from the torn image, wide and accusing, like she knew something he didn't. Rehan's jaw tightened. The symbolism was deliberate. It was a language he had seen before, a pattern he recognized from a case 12 years ago that had left him broken but determined. The apartment seemed to hum with quiet menace. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a warning. He moved to the mirror again, scrutinizing the lipstick-written message. "You remember me now?" Rehan's mind raced through old faces, old files, names he had tried to bury. He remembered the cold nights, the unanswered questions, the victims he had promised justice for, but never delivered. And now, it seemed, someone had come to remind him of every failure. A soft click made him freeze. The door to the balcony had been unlocked, a small thing, but enough to set off alarms in his mind. Whoever had staged this scene had planned for him to see it, planned for him to arrive alone. It was no longer just a murder investigation. It was a psychological trap. Rehan exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar thrill and dread intertwine. He scribbled notes, photographing everything for evidence, but his gaze kept returning to the mirror. Someone wanted him to feel guilt, to remember, to react. He wasn't sure if he should be angry or afraid. Maybe, but this case wasn't he just about a victim anymore. It was about him. Rehan's flashlight cut through the gloom, highlighting details he had missed before. A faint smear of blood on the window latch, footprints in the dust that didn't match the victim, and a series of cryptic symbols etched into the floorboard near the bed. Each mark, each irregularity, was a whisper from the killer. A challenge he couldn't ignore. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a crime scene. It was a puzzle crafted to torment him. He crouched by the mirror again, tracing the letters with his finger. "You remember me now?" The message didn't just threaten it. Accused, his mind replayed fragments from the unsolved case that had nearly destroyed him. A killer who had vanished without a trace, victims whose faces haunted his dreams, and mistakes he couldn't undo. And now, it seemed that Ghost had returned. The room felt colder, the air heavier. Rehan's phone buzzed again. A text this time, anonymous. "Look closer, or lose everything. Stephen Lenti, Firwanti." Just for his life. It was for his sanity. Every instinct screamed that the killer was watching, waiting, manipulating him like a marionette. Yet, in the pit of his gut, he felt the grim satisfaction of a detective alive in his element. The chase, the unraveling of secrets, the confrontation with the darkness others refused to see. He moved to the desk and rifled through the victim's papers. One notebook fell open to a page filled with a list of names and dates. His eyes froze on a single name, underlined twice, Rehan Mirza. The room spun slightly, the gravity of it pressing down on him. Someone had planned this for him, targeted him directly, and had been orchestrating it long before he even stepped into the apartment. For the first time in decades, Rehan felt something he rarely did. Doubt, not in his skills, but in the belief that he could endure what was coming. The detective who never broke was standing on the edge of a case that demanded more than courage. It demanded everything he had left, and he realized, with chilling clarity, that tonight was only the beginning. Rehan sat alone in his office, the dim light from the desk lamp cutting through the shadows like a lifeline in darkness. Around him, stacks of old files, yellowed photographs, and faded newspaper clippings formed a chaotic fortress of memory. He hadn't touched these cases in over a decade, preferring to lock them away in the recesses of his mind. But now, with the message on the mirror still burning in his thoughts, he knew there was no turning back. He opened the folder labeled Unsolved-2013 and ran his fingers over the brittle edges. 12 years ago, a series of murders had plagued the city. Victims found in carefully staged scenes. Cryptic messages left at each site, and a trail that vanished just as it seemed to converge. Rehan had been close. Too close. One misstep, one overlooked clue, and the killer had slipped through his grasp. The case had left him hollow, haunted, but determined. Until now, it had remained a ghost, a wound he rarely acknowledged. A photo slipped from the folder, a crime scene that had never left him. A young woman sprawled across a floral rug, her hands positioned unnaturally, her eyes wide in silent accusation. Rehan studied the image, noting the minute details. The angle of the lamp, the streak of red across the mirror, the broken frame on the wall. "It's him," he whispered, almost aloud. The Sameh and the same precision, the same cruel intimacy. Whoever had returned was following his old cases with meticulous care. Rehan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He could feel the weight of the past pressing down, mixing with the fear of the present. Every memory of those failed investigations came rushing back. The cold nights spent chasing shadows, the faces of victims that had haunted his dreams, and the gnawing doubt that had once nearly destroyed him. I understood in that moment that this wasn't just a continuation of an old case. It was a resurrection, and someone had been waiting all this time to ensure he remembered everything. Rehan's office phone rang, jolting him from the spiraling memories. It was the crime lab. The new victim's evidence had been processed. He studied the results in silence, noting patterns that made his stomach tighten. The fibers, the fingerprints, the traces of a rare chemical. All pointed to a connection he had feared. The same killer from 12 years ago had returned, and they were targeting people linked to him. He spread the old crime scene photographs across his desk, comparing them with the evidence from the apartment on Gina Avenue. The similarities were uncanny. Every scene was staged with obsessive precision, every message written with intent, and every victim chosen with a purpose only the killer could know. Rehan traced the lines of the photographs with his finger, feeling the invisible hand of the murderer guiding him toward a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to face. Rehan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The message from the mirror wasn't just a threat. It was a challenge. "You remember me now?" Whoever had sent it knew him, his habits, his fears, his past mistakes. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a random resurgence. This was personal. The killer wasn't just recreating old crimes. They were rewriting his history, forcing him to confront the ghosts he had long tried to bury. He closed his eyes, the images of past victims flashing behind his eyelids, faces that had haunted his dreams, names he had whispered silently in the dark, mistakes he had made. All of it converged into one inescapable truth. The past was alive, and it was hunting him. Rehan knew he had no choice but to dive deeper, to uncover the connections that could save future victims, and perhaps himself. Rehan sat in the dim glow of his office, the city outside a blur of rain and streetlights. A new lead had come in, a witness who claimed to recognize a figure near the latest crime scene. The description was faint, but one detail sent a chill down his spine. The silhouette moved with the same methodical precision he remembered from the unsolved case 12 years ago. He pulled out a folder of old police reports, flipping through pages of evidence he had studied countless times before. As he read, a terrible thought began to form, gnawing at the edges of his mind. One by one, the details aligned. The time, the victims, the cryptic messages. Someone had been observing him all these years, waiting for the right moment to strike. But why? And why now? Then his eyes fell on a notation he had overlooked before, buried in a footnote. A suspect who had never been questioned fully. Someone whose disappearance had been dismissed as irrelevant. Rehan's heart pounded. The pattern was clear. The new murders were not random, and the killer's obsession wasn't with the victims. It was with him. Every step, every message, every crime scene was a reflection of the detective he had been, a challenge, a taunt, a mirror showing him the man he had tried to forget. Rehan pushed the files aside, running his hands over his face. A quiet anger surged through him, mingling with fear. He realized that solving this case wasn't just about justice for the victims anymore. It was about survival, about confronting the darkness he had spent years avoiding, and in the shadows outside his office, he could almost hear the whisper of the past, a voice promising that this was only the beginning. The city was quiet that night, the usual hum of traffic replaced by the soft patter of rain against window. Detective Rehan Mirza stood in the apartment again, retracing his steps as though the room itself held answers that had been invisible before. Every object, every mark, every shadow seemed to pulse with intent, as if the walls themselves were alive watching him. He crouched by the mirror, staring at the words still smudged on the surface. "You'll remember me now?" The red letters gleamed faintly under the flickering lamp, mocking him. Rehan could almost feel the presence of the killer lingering. Patient? Observing? The realization hit him like ice water. This wasn't about the victims anymore. This was about him. Every crime, every clue, every cryptic symbol was meticulously tailored to unravel his mind. He examined the apartment in detail, noticing new subtleties. Fingerprints on the windowsill that didn't match the victim. A faint trace of cologne he knew all too well. A small, deliberate smudge on a photograph of a past case. Whoever had returned had studied him, studied his past cases, and now they were rewriting them. Every move, every message, every setup wasn't random. It was a reflection of his own history, a mirror forcing him to confront mistakes he had long tried to bury. Rehan's phone buzzed. A photo message appeared, an image of him, taken from outside the apartment earlier that night, blurred but unmistakable. Beneath it, a note. "Closer than you think." The detective's pulse quickened. He understood now. The killer was not just stalking the city. They were stalking him, and with each calculated step, the line between hunter and hunted blurred. He exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the desk, his mind racing through possibilities. This case had crossed a boundary no investigation ever had. It was personal, intimate, and terrifyingly clever. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, the person responsible was watching, waiting for him to realize that the game had only just begun. Rehan sat at his cluttered desk, the dim glow of his laptop reflecting in his tired eyes. He had begun analyzing the messages, photographs, and crime scene details with a precision bordering on obsession. Patterns emerged, subtle, almost imperceptible, that linked the new murders to the old unsolved cases. Each symbol, each message, each arrangement of the crime scenes was part of a carefully orchestrated design. He traced lines between the victims' names, dates, and locations, mapping them against his own past investigations. The connections were unnerving. Killer wasn't just recreating old crimes. They were mirroring his career, his memories, his failures. Each new scene was tailored to haunt him, to test him, to prove that even the unbreakable could be shattered. Rehan's hand shook as he reviewed the photos again. One detail stood out: a series of small codes embedded within the crime scene photographs, almost invisible to the casual observer. They were like breadcrumbs, a message meant only for him. He realized with chilling clarity that this wasn't a random killer. This was someone who understood his mind, his methods, even his fears. The detective leaned back, the chair creaking under the tension. Questions spiraled through his head. Who would know me this well? Who would dare to challenge me so personally? He felt the weight of the past pressing down, memories of failures and missed clues resurfacing with brutal clarity. This wasn't just a case. It was a test of his very sanity, and somewhere in the shadows, he knew, the person orchestrating this watched, waited, and thrived on his unease. Rehan clenched his fists, determination mingling with dread. He had faced darkness before, but never like this. The case was no longer about solving a murder. It was about confronting a reflection of himself and surviving it. The city had gone silent, wrapped in a thick, suffocating fog. Rehan walked the familiar streets alone, his trench coat pulled tight against the night air. Every shadow felt alive, every distant footstep a potential trap. His mind raced through the evidence again. The codes, the photographs, the patterns that all pointed to one undeniable truth. The killer was always a step ahead, watching, anticipating his every move. Back at the apartment, new evidence arrived: a package, unmarked, left at the front desk. Rehan opened it carefully. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph. Him in his office earlier that evening. Reviewing the old case files, beneath it, a note scrawled in the same red lettering. You can't hide from the past. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. Whoever this was, they had been following him, studying him, manipulating his actions. Every step of the investigation, a stage in their game. Rehan's hands shook, but his mind sharpened. Fear mingled with resolve. This wasn't random violence. It was an intimate, psychological assault. The killer was recreating his memories, forcing him to confront every failure, every regret, every mistake. And now the message was clear. The line between hunter and hunted had vanished. He was no longer just solving a crime. He was surviving a calculated assault on his mind. As he stared at the photograph, a chill ran through him. Someone knew him better than anyone ever had. Someone had orchestrated this entire scenario, not just to kill, but to break him. And somewhere out there, in the fog-drenched city, that person waited. Rehan clenched his jaw, the weight of the personal threat igniting a fire within him. He would chase this shadow into the depths of the past, and he would not stop until the truth was forced into the light, no matter the cost. Rain battered the city streets like a relentless drumbeat, drenching the alleys in puddles that reflected neon signs and fractured patterns. Detective Rehan Mirza moved through the darkness, each step echoing in the empty avenues. He felt the pull of the past stronger than ever, a magnetic force dragging him toward a truth he had tried to avoid for years. This case was no longer a puzzle. It was a reckoning. The tip he had received led him to an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. Its walls were scarred with graffiti, windows shattered, and the faint smell of damp and rust filled the air. Rehan's flashlight cut through the shadows, illuminating signs of recent occupation, scattered papers, footprints in the dust, and a faint smear of red on the far wall. Someone had been here, and they had been waiting. He paused at the center of the room, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. In the dim glow, he noticed a figure reflected in the shards of broken glass, watching him, unblinking. A chill ran down his spine. The reflection was deliberate, taunting, almost intimate. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a mirror of his own fears, his failures, the man he had tried to be. Rehan drew a slow breath, steeling himself. Whoever had orchestrated this had known exactly how to get to him every crime. Every clue, every message had been designed to dismantle his composure piece by piece. The detective who had never broken now faced a choice: confront the orchestrator or let the shadows consume him. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. As he stepped forward into the warehouse, ready to face the man behind the reflection, the warehouse was silent, except for the distant drip of water from a broken pipe. Rehan's flashlight cut jagged lines across the floor, walls, and scattered debris. Every instinct screamed caution. Every shadow whispered danger. He knew the killer was here. He could feel it in the air, in the way the space seemed to pulse with calculated menace. Then a voice broke the silence, low and deliberate, almost a whisper. "Detective Mirza." Rehan froze. The tone was familiar, almost intimate, sending a shiver down his spine. "I've been waiting for you to remember me." The words sliced through the air, precise, calculated. Rehan's heart raced. He scanned the darkness, searching for a figure that blended seamlessly with the shadows. The killer stepped forward, just enough to reveal a face partially obscured by a hood. Rehan's mind raced. This person knew every step of his career, every misstep, every case that had haunted him for years. The crimes, the messages, the psychological torment. It had all been designed to pull him into this moment. The killer's motive was clear now. This wasn't just revenge. It was an obsession with him, a desire to make Rehan face the failures he had buried. Rehan's voice was steady, controlled, but his pulse betrayed the tension. "Why me? Why now?" The figure smiled faintly, almost pityingly. "Because the unbreakable deserve to remember that even the strongest can fracture, and because some truths only reveal themselves when the hunter is forced to confront his own reflection." Every nerve in Rehan, Isabadi tensed. The detective who had never broken was now facing a choice: pursue justice, or survive the psychological assault that had been meticulously engineered for years. The shadows seemed to shift, closing in as the air thickened with the weight of the impending revelation. Rehan's eyes locked onto the figure, analyzing every subtle movement, every hint of intention. The warehouse seemed to shrink around them, the shadows pressing closer as if eager to witness the final confrontation. He could feel the years of pressure, the past failures, and the relentless pursuit coalesced into a singular moment. The killer spoke again, calm and deliberate. "Do you see now? Every detail, every choice, every victim. It was all about you. Not them, not the city, but you." Rehan's jaw tightened. His mind raced through memories of past cases, mistakes he had thought long buried, and the torment he had endured for over a decade. This person had orchestrated a labyrinth of fear, obsession, and guilt designed to shatter him. But Rehan was not yet broken. He stepped forward, voice steady, despite the storm within. "You may have studied me, manipulated me, but this ends tonight. You won't define me with your games." The figure froze for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing their face. In that pose Rehan saw the truth. A mix of obsession, envy, and a desire for recognition that had driven the killer for years. With deliberate precision, Rehan moved, seizing the advantage the shadows had momentarily granted him. The killer tried to flee, but the detective anticipated every step, cutting off their escape. In the final moments, the orchestrator's mask, both literal and metaphorical, was stripped away. The person behind the reflection was revealed, not just as a criminal, but as someone shaped by their own obsession with Rehan's past, desperate to force the unbreakable man to confront his own vulnerabilities. As the figure was secured, Rehan stood in the warehouse, rain dripping from the broken roof, the weight of years pressing on him, but finally, somehow, lifting. The case was closed, but the lesson lingered. Even the strongest can be tested, and the reflection we fear most is often the one staring back at us. He exhaled, slowly, letting the storm outside mirror the calm he felt within the detective who had faced the darkness and had survived. The city returned to its rhythm, unaware of the battle waged in the shadows. Detective Rehan Mirza stepped into the dawn, rain-slicked streets beneath his feet, carrying the scars of a case that had nearly broken him. He knew the city would always demand more justice, more vigilance, more courage. But one truth remained. Facing the darkness within was the only way to conquer the darkness without. If this case caught your attention, subscribe for the next investigation. Another mystery awaits. Follow to uncover it.